And welcome everybody to our first session of A Sailor's Life Live. So hi everyone, this is a new online program series from the USS Constitution Museum. My name is Sarah. I'm an educator at the museum. And we will be coming to you weekly through this program with new topics related to life at sea on board the ship. We're going to be lucky enough to be joined today by some of the active duty Navy crew members who interpret this ship every day, and they will show us some of the places on the ship related to our topics each week. Today, we're going to be learning about communication at sea, the different ways that sailors would have communicated with one another and with other ships while they were out at sea. And I have a friend, one of our crew members, who's going to show us the related areas on the ship. So I'm going to turn it over to him now so that he can briefly introduce himself.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you guys there. Hello, I'm Logistics Specialist, 3rd Class Petty Officer Jason Edel Petitfrère of the United States Navy, stationed aboard the USS Constitution. Old Ironsides herself, the oldest commissioned warship afloat in the entire world, and it is my pleasure to have each and every single one of you here with us on this live stream, talking today about communication, as we just mentioned. So today, I'll be getting onto the ship, and we'll be talking about the different locations that this whole communication aspect of what we'll be speaking about took place, and how it related to everyday life on the ship, as well as in battle or in different situations, ship to ship.
That's right. Thank you, Jason. I'm really excited you're joining us. And like you said, that you'll be able to show us some of the spaces on the ship that are related to the topics that we're going to learn about today. And before we dive in, I do want to just be sure to share a couple of the features of Zoom so that you know, everyone watching, how to communicate with Jason and I as we go through our program. The first one is the Q&A feature. So if you're watching this on a computer, you should notice along the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box. If at any point you have a question for me or for Jason, feel free to leave that question in the Q&A, and we will answer those as best we can, as many as we have time for. And there are also going to be points during our program today when I ask a question of you who are watching this. So for you to be able to share your answers, you're going to use the chat feature of the Zoom. So again, that's going to be a button down along the bottom. You can share your answers with chat. Now, I do want to make sure, since many of you watching, there's a fair chance you've been on Constitution before, you've visited the museum. Feel free to give us a shout out in the chat if you have. But there could be people watching today who have just never seen the ship before. So Jason, do you mind giving us just a 1-minute lowdown on what Constitution is, why she's so important? I know that's really hard to fit into 1 minute, but let's see what you can do.
Oh, yeah. It is a daunting task indeed, but I shall endeavor to do so. So, talking about the Constitution, I mentioned her 2 titles, or 2 names: oldest commissioned warship afloat in the entire world, as well as Old Ironsides. That is a name that she got in the War of 1812, a war that I hope many of you know was very important to American history. It was kind of like the Revolutionary War Part 2. So what the Constitution did in that war was fight against the British on the open ocean. The main thing we did was stop privateers or pirates from attacking our merchant vessels, as well as prevent the British from taking our sailors and impressing them into their own navy. So the USS Constitution was one of the most famous and last remaining original ships built by the United States Navy that you know of today to be the world's most powerful navy. The USS Constitution was a 3rd out of 6, and it came from this city right here, Boston herself. All right, she was launched in 1797, October 21st to be exact. So today she is 222 years old. She's about to be turning 223 years old. It took her 3 launch attempts to get into the water, but she is to this day an undefeated beast of the seas. Turning it right back over to you.
That was great. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Jason. So like you said, Constitution really gains her fame during the War of 1812. So when we talk about communication at sea, and as we talk about life at sea, we're really going to focus on life at sea during that period, the War of 1812. So to start things off with our first form of communication, we're going to turn to the museum's object collection. The USS Constitution Museum has hundreds of objects in our collection. We use these every day to really share the story and legacy of the ship. And we're going to begin here by looking at one of these objects that has something to do with communication at sea. So in just a moment, I'm going to share my screen with you all. You should see a photo of this object on your screen. And while we look at that, I'm not going to reveal what the object is. I want us all to practice our observation skills. So we're going to look closely at the photo of this object and try and determine, just by looking at it, what that object is and what is it used for? What is its job? I'll ask a couple of other questions to maybe prompt you to look at some different things. And then I'll ask you guys with the chat feature to share your guesses on what that object is. So let me pull up the photo now. All right, here we go. This is our object here. So as we look at this object together, I want everyone to look closely. Again, we're using our observation skills. And let's look at it and think maybe how large do you think this object is? Or if you can see on there, are there different colors? Is it shiny in some areas, dull in other areas? I'm noticing some differences there. Let's observe the shape of this object. So does that shape stay uniform or does it change maybe from one end of the object to the other end? And I'm wondering if the shape of this object maybe helps it do its job. I'm also curious if a person would use this object or if it could do its job just on its own. So again, thinking about maybe what this could be used for, what this object is. I see we have some answers coming into our chat here. It looks like you guys are using your observation skills and really thinking critically about what this is. I'm going to go ahead and reveal what our object is now. So our object is a speaking trumpet. I see someone has said megaphone. That's a really good guess, and that's actually really similar to what this object would have been. So again, a speaking trumpet. I'm going to go to another image here so we can see a figure on the right-hand side of our screen demonstrating how this object is used. This is a figure who's Charles Morris. He was a historic crew member on board the ship. You can see he's speaking into a narrow end of our speaking trumpet, and his voice, when he does that, would be amplified and directed through the other end of the trumpet. So I saw someone say a megaphone. That speaking trumpet definitely reminds me of a megaphone that my teachers would have used when they were calling us in from recess. Or maybe if you've been to a sports game and you've seen someone using a cone, a cheerleader, or a fan to really pump up the team or cheer them on. Even if you've ever, just to make your voice louder, put your hands around your mouth to sort of direct the sound of your voice. All of those are functioning in similar ways to that speaking trumpet. And I want to show you that I have a replica speaking trumpet with me here now. So this is a replica. A replica means that it looks a lot like the real historic object, but this was not made in 1812. It would not have been used in 1812. It's not that old at all, so we're able to kind of handle it in a different way, and we would be much more careful with the object in our collection. But you can see here from this replica, it's about 1.5 feet long. We do have one end where it's a bit narrower, and then we taper up into this wider end. And if I speak into the trumpet, you should be able to hear. I don't want to do that too much. my voice is amplified. It gets a lot louder. So this was a really useful tool for sailors on board the ship for two main uses. The first one would be what I'm going to call ship-to-ship communication. So if Constitution is out at sea for months at a time, I want you to imagine what that would have felt like. You might have been pretty disconnected, certainly from your family and your friends, but also from, in a lot of cases, the world at large. So if Constitution encountered another vessel while out at sea, an order might have been given to sail close to a friendly vessel to be able to communicate using this speaking trumpet with people on that other ship. Say it was a merchant ship, folks who were out at sea, they might have information about current events or maybe information about something from a nearby port. And that would be really critical things for crew members on Constitution to know while they were out at sea. It was also just used in every day while you were on the ship. So officers, an officer of the deck or a lieutenant might use this speaking trumpet to relay orders to crew members. And that could have been an everyday scenario. It also could have been something a little bit more stressful, like a battle situation. We have an image in our collection, and I'll show you on my screen here, an image that really makes that clear. So you should see shortly, if not already, this painting called Close the Enemy on your screen. This is another painting, an object in the museum's collection. This depicts the spar deck, the top open deck of USS Constitution, in a moment of battle. She's, in this particular case, engaged with HMS Java, a British ship during the War of 1812. You can see there's so much happening in this image. If we look really closely, though, we can see a speaking trumpet is being used among everything else going on. So we have over in the left-hand side, almost in the corner here, an officer who's using the speaking trumpet to relay orders to other crew members. And this is something he could have done about sail maneuvering that needed to get to the ship to a certain position, or he could be relaying an order to one of the many gun crews that we see along the side of the ship here. Now, it's certainly helpful to look at objects in our collection and images in our collection to see how they might have been used. But since we do have Jason who's on the ship itself, I want to be sure that he gets a chance to show us some spaces on the ship where this speaking trumpet might have been used. So Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that might have been used on the ship itself?
Well, your timing couldn't be any better because currently there's a flyover in the area.
I hear you too. You need a speaking trumpet, Jason, to talk to us.
Apparently, goodness. So you did mention ship-to-ship communication, correct?
Yes, I did.
All right. So I believe this is the perfect spot because imagine there would be an officer right there standing right on one of the open waste bulwarks, and that's this open area right here that they would use to unload or offload supplies from a pier or anything like that. He would be standing right about here or right at the quarterdeck there. And then imagine there's another ship right where you see these poles in the water right there. He'd be able to use a speaking trumpet to pass over a message to them without personally getting into one of the small boats and then sit and rowing all the way to the other ship to speak to them. He would be able to use a speaking trumpet to get his message across, just like that, very simply. Now, let's get back onto the ship and talk about on-ship communication. Because imagine, for example, let's see. So, just for our audience real quick, where would the helm be? Would it be at the front of the ship or the wheel of the ship? Would it be at the front of the ship or the back of the ship? Any guesses?
That chat feature, if you have a guess.
Ooh, the front. All right, so let's check out the front really quickly. I'm going as fast as my dress shoes can take me. All right. Okay, so at the front we have this. It's called the smokestack or the Charlie Noble. no wheel here, or any spot where I believe a wheel would be. We have the foremast, we have the jib, but no wheel. Midship. Okay, so let's check out midship. Dress shoes going fast again. Here we go. Oh, and we have some modern day sailors right here. All right. We have the bell. Would you guys like to wave for the children? All right. Currently, this is our quarter deck, but no spot for the wheel. So that leaves in the back or aft. Going and going. So it's not all the way in the back because this is the captain's skylight. All right. Nothing here, but if we move to just ahead of the mizzenmast, or the most aftmost mast out of three, so we've got 1, 2, and then 3 right here, we find the spot for the wheel. All right. So as you can see, we may or may not have encountered some privateers and or pirates that thought our wheel was pretty cool. So our wheel is currently not here. All right. But in all seriousness, our wheel is taken off because during the winter season, we take those things off just to make sure that they're properly maintained. And as you can see, there are some tents right here, and that is an ode to M&R, or maintenance and repair. And they work over in building 2-4, which is that building right there. And they're the ones that specialize in restoring the wood of the actual ship. So going back to communication, an officer would be standing right here or right there next to the wheel, which is a part of the helm, and then using his speaking trumpet to project his voice all the way to the front of the ship or midship to give his orders out. So the commanding officer could be standing here and giving his orders out there, or pointing his speaking horn down the ladder well to give orders down to the deck below, which would be the gun deck. Or how about we look upwards, and we now find the fighting tops. Ooh, that's a nice little sun ray right there. Very pretty. All right. On the other side, more fighting tops. And lastly, another fighting top at the end there atop of the foremast. So fighting tops are where typically the Marines would be stationed mid-battle to fight and to essentially snipe or use their long arms, and by arms I mean weapons, to shoot at priority targets on the enemy side. Or there'd be sailors climbing up these nets right here, or lines, which are called shrouds, to get up to the sails, which would be attached to the yards. Now, they don't always know exactly when to do what. So typically, whoever's in charge would use their speaking horn, point it up like that, and give out orders to raise the sails or lower the sails or bring them up to half or to a quarter, whatever needs to be done to make sure that the ship is being properly maneuvered in and out of battle. And so those are just a few of the most important uses of the speaking trumpet.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jason. It's always really great to see on the ship itself where some of these objects would have been used. I think you did a great job of showing us all the different types of commands to where that voice would need to be amplified up to, even as high as those fighting tops. And since Constitution is a warship, moments like battle that Jason described, communication would have been almost a life and death matter. So certainly the speaking trumpet really helps sailors do that effectively at that time. I want to move on to our second form of communication at sea now. And this is a form that's really useful if, say, Constitution or any vessel needed to communicate with a ship that was just in view, but too far away to communicate with verbally. No matter how loud you yell in that speaking trumpet, there's no way they're going to hear what you're saying. So we have another method of communication, and that is signal flags. Now, while I pull up an image on my screen here, I want you all to think if you've ever developed a secret code or a secret language and spoken in code with your friends or your family through that language. Well, signal flags, they're an awful lot like communicating or speaking in a coded language. We're looking at a chart now on our screen of an international code of signals. This is a simplified chart. And this is also a code that would not have been around in 1812 when USS Constitution was fighting in that war. But I want to show you this version, which was developed several years later, at least the earliest versions in the 1850s, because I think it makes clear how this coded communication works. We see there are a series of different flags. These are flags that can be raised on a mast or off of a yardarm, those pieces of the ship that Jason showed us just a while ago, somewhere that's visible to another ship. And you can communicate through these different flags. We see there are flags for each letter of the alphabet. There are flags for different numbers. There are also flags that represent things like repeat that last letter or things of this nature. So it's easy to think, looking at this, that the way we communicate is by spelling out letter by letter a word, each letter in a word, each word in a sentence. But if you think that through a little bit, you might realize that's going to take a long time to raise all of these flags and spell out even a 5-word sentence. So the way that this worked was actually much more streamlined. Each of the flags you see here, these flags that represent letters, they indicate a distinct message. Let's look at one for an example. So if we take Alpha, this A flag up in the top left corner, if you see a ship flying this flag, that indicates they have a diver below. So any vessel in the area that can see that Alpha flag knows to stay a safe enough distance that that diver can safely do their job. Same is true for each of these letter flags. They each represent a distinct message, and you can communicate with a single signal flag. It's hard to say fast. Or if you pair flags together, they can also represent a message. Now, that's our crash course on the international code here. But I did mention that this was not developed in the War of 1812 or even Constitution's later career. So how was Constitution communicating with signal flags then? Well, let's turn to the museum's collection again. So we're looking now at an image from a record book kept by Lieutenant Elie Vallette. He was a lieutenant on board the ship. This dates from 1827. And we can see here that he has copied and sketched this series of signal flags into his record book. We know from his record, and because it survives today, that these were the exact sequences that crew members could use to call back a small boat. So if you were in one of those small boats, you saw this specific sequence of flags that meant your boat was meant to come back to the ship, to Constitution. It's a much more effective way of communicating through these quick signal flags than to try to speak through a trumpet when it was probably too far to hear. And of course, signal flags continue to be used by the Navy and other vessels past the War of 1812, past 1827. I have a couple images here from the World War II era that I just found interesting. So I have here, we can see this is USS Ranger, a ship, a Navy ship from the Second World War. And what I think is interesting about this image is we see the signal flag certainly flying over here on the right side of the photo, but there's also evidence that technology has improved. There's antenna that we can see in this photograph and radar as well. But even though they have these improvements in technology, they're still flying signal flags to communicate in the 1940s as well. Another quick image from this era shows us how signal flags were made then. I think it's important to recognize that we have these women here who are helping out with the war effort on the home front, sewing these flags. It also gives us a good sense of scale, so we can compare the size of these flags to a human and get a sense of how large they are. And USS Constitution does still fly signal flags today. This is a photo from a recent underway cruise out in Boston Harbor. We can see, if we kind of trace along our masts here, these different points on the ship, that there are a whole string of flags, and they're not necessarily communicating one distinct message. These are a bit more ceremonial, and they're fun, festive decoration, in this case to celebrate the 4th of July. So now we know a little bit more about signal flags and our international code of signals. I want to test out how well you guys watching can decode some messages in signal flags. So the way this will work is I will share an image on my screen, You'll see on one side of the image will be a decoding chart. So you'll have all of the different flags and the letters related to them. On the other side of the screen, you'll have the message in signal flags. I'm cheating a little bit. I know that we all know signal flags are not used to spell out a word, but I think you can handle the extra challenge of more flags if I spell out a word for you now. So that's the way we're going to do it. I'll show my screen. You guys can take a few seconds to try to decode that message and share the message with us in the chat box when you think you have it. So let me pull up our first message here, and we'll get started. Again, you see on the left side, you have a decoding chart. On the right-hand side, you have the word that we've spelled out in signal flags. And let's see here how well you can do at decoding our secret message. We have a couple of repeat letters, so might have gone easy on you there. We'll see. Oh, I'm seeing our answers popping up in the chat box, so I think I'm going to reveal our message here. Our secret word is H-U-Z-Z-A-H, huzzah. Now that's kind of a funny sounding word. You might not have heard that before. Some of us might have, but this is really a celebration, a word of celebration, probably most famously used in Constitution context, when in the midst of a battle against HMS Guerriere, a crew member noticed cannonballs bouncing off the sides of the ship and shouted, supposedly, huzzah, her sides are made of iron. It's where we get that nickname, Old Iron Sides. So there's our first secret message. I see a lot of you guys got that in the chat. Well done. You did so well. I'm going to do one more message here to share with you. This one is a photograph, so it might be a little bit harder to see off the bat, but it is coming to us directly from USS Constitution. This is currently hanging alongside the ship. The crew have hung these flags here to send a very special message. And again, use that decoding chart. Let us know in the chat once you have decoded the message that's coming from USS Constitution. See a couple answers coming in. You guys got it. You are master decoders. So our secret message, special message from the ship is thank you. Now that is certainly more familiar maybe than huzzah, but Jason, I wonder if I turn it over to you, can you share with us why the crew has written this particular message and hung it alongside the ship right now?
Absolutely. Well, in light of recent events and what the world is currently facing, this or these string of signal flags have been put up in honor of MGH, or Massachusetts General Hospital, and their efforts, their continued efforts in terms of facing the COVID-19 epidemic and dealing with it as best as they can. They are sacrificing a lot in terms of time, money, and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, whatever they have to do to make sure that everybody is safe, everybody is getting healthier, and that this whole epidemic comes to a close. So in honor of all of that, we at the USS Constitution, we put up these signal flags to say thank you to them for their honor and their sacrifice towards whatever we need to do to get this all done and get through it together. And of course, that's always been what the USS Constitution has been about. It's always been about getting through it together as a crew, as a command, as a Navy, as a country, and as the American people.
Wow, so super well said, Jason. I, for one, am definitely inspired by everything you guys do, and certainly by this message of gratitude that you now are sharing with MGH and other healthcare workers and essential workers in Boston. So we have a challenge for everybody watching. You guys, we're challenging you to share your own messages, your thank you messages with people who could use one. So they're, like Jason said, with everything going on right now, there are certainly people out there who deserve a thank you. You can hang that message maybe in a window in your home so that someone can see it as they're walking by. For students, you guys can share a thank you message with your teachers. They're definitely really going through a lot to help continue your education these days, and certainly with your parents as well. You get bonus points if you share that message in signal flags, because it's fun, it's festive, but also you can share a little bit more about what you learned in this program today. So that's all we have for you on communication and Constitution. I know we're really close to our time, but I did see some questions that were popping up. It looks like we have a lot of them that were answered live in our program. We have one question that I think ties in nicely with our kind of parting message. We have someone who's wondering how they can watch this program after we end our session today. And that is an easy answer for us. We are recording this webinar and this program, so I would go to our website, USSCM, as in USS Constitution Museum.org, and you can find different program activities, recordings of this webinar, all kinds of Constitution content, other objects in our collection to learn more about the ship itself. So definitely check out our website for that. Jason, I see one other question I'm going to direct at you quickly before we wrap things up. And that is something that we've seen a couple times as you've been showing us panning over to the ship. Why is her foremast down there? Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
Indeed, I can. So, the foremast currently, the foremast extensions, or the topmast and the topgallant mast and topgallant royal, those are down for repairs because, of course, the forward mast has sustained a bit of damage in terms of the weather and the actual age of the wood itself. So, as I mentioned, M&R, maintenance and repair, the civilian contractors that so graciously work with us to restore the ship again and again and again, they've been able to use a large crane to come and take off the extra mast extensions, or the top mast and the gallant mast, and take those over to building 2 for repairs. So currently none of that is mounted onto the ship. As you can see, there are lines connected the foremast to the main mast, and it doesn't go any further up than that. That is because, of course, it would be pretty much a huge hazard to the ship, as well as any visitors coming around, if that were to suddenly break. So we had to make sure that safety was the number one priority, and keeping the Constitution afloat is number 2. So we had to take that off for repairs mainly.
All right, yeah, the work is never done repairing this ship, right? You shared with us she's over 220 years old at this point, and so we know that all of you, certainly in the crew and M&R, do a lot of work to keep her ship shape. So all part of the work that's going on. Now, unfortunately, we are running a little bit over, so I think for other questions you have, we'll be sure, especially over on Facebook, to go back and answer those. I'm also going to share in the chat here, we'll be sure to do that on Facebook as well, an at-home activity related to our signal flags. So if you really were enjoying decoding those messages and want to print out your own signal flags, send some other messages, maybe that thank you message, you can follow that link for more fun there. But again, check out our website, usscm.org, for more activities and information about Constitution. Also our social media, we're posting every day new content. And Jason, do you have any final words for our group here before we sign off?
Let's see. Actually, yes. Just one more thing. In terms of the relevance of everything that we're doing today, and great time for yet another flyover. But I just want to say, for all the children, all the kids watching, as well as their parents, why is this important? Why does this relate to you? Well, to simply answer that, it is all connected to people. It is all connected to movements. It is all connected to groups that were responsible for allowing us the freedoms that we have today. And that's why, in honor of all of that, to keep the history alive, to honor the memory of those past and their actions as well, we talk about what may seem like little things like signal flags or speaking trumpets. Of course, nowadays in the Navy, we have sound-powered phones that we can use to communicate on ships. Or if we're talking some of the earlier wars, we can talk about Morse code or just light signals, that kind of stuff. So of course, we still have, radios nowadays, but back then they didn't have access to all of that. So presentations like these and meetings like these and streams like these are very important in terms of telling us what the past used to be like, in terms of how far we've come, and honoring the memory of what they sacrificed in terms of how difficult it was just to survive back then. So in terms of using all of that and how it relates to you today, nowadays we still have difficulties. We still have challenges that we face. We still have occasional moments where the Wi-Fi is down. What do you do then? All right. So moments like these, you can remember, oh, we talked about signal flags. Oh, we talked about, the speaking horn,
Yeah.
speaking trumpet.
Yes.
There we go. All right. So you remember moments like that, and you think to yourself, maybe this situation isn't so bad. And it gives you a bit of hope. It gives you a bit of strength to keep going. All right. As silly as it may sound sometimes, it actually works. So don't forget us. Don't forget about the Constitution Museum and all the information that they give you each and every single day via their social media or their Facebook, whatever it is, and beautiful meetings like these. All right. So keep it up, guys. Thank you very much for joining us today. From the USS Constitution to you, thank you.
Oh man, Jason, that was awesome. You wrapped it all up, put a bow on it. That was great. I think you really made a good point of these lessons from the past, how important they are to both, like you said, let us know how far we've come, but also how similar, so many of these basic aspects of our lives are. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this program. Again, check us out on our website, on social media. Check out the ship on social media every day at 10 a.m. They're doing live tours of Constitution. You'll see even more than this brief moment that we saw today. So again, thank you everybody for joining. We want to make sure that you tune in next week. We'll have a whole nother program on a different aspect of life at sea on the ship next Wednesday at 1. So we hope to see you then. Thank you again, Jason, so much. And on behalf of the museum, we thank you guys for joining. So take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys. Take care. Stay safe.